This sermon series is about the commands that Jesus gave us. So we did Deuteronomy, where God gave commands to the whole of the nation of Israel. Now we're looking at the things that Jesus said personally. And is it different? Is it the same? We'll be seeing week by week. And this week we're looking at the command to love one another. So let me start by reading just 2 verses. So you may think, this is so short, so easy, 2 verses, 5-minute sermon, we'll be able to tick the box, say, okay, understood that, done, next. Are you ready? This is John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. Jesus said, "A new command I give you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." So I want you to start by thinking, I don't know if it's on the slides, I've got a question to think about. Is there a time in your life when you have particularly felt loved? So I want to start with this because I think this is the starting point. To try and understand what Jesus is talking about with love, what is your experience of what it is to feel loved? Think of a time, a situation, a person, a moment in your life, or a whole period of your life. I'm going to shut up for a minute and give you a chance to think about it, get deep into what was going on and what it felt like. So I'm going to interrupt. I hope that you could bring that to mind. It's worth saying that often we find it much easier to remember times when we felt fear or anger or hate or things that were difficult. It's much easier. It's not always easy to remember times, situations where things have been good. But we started with that for a reason. It's what we're focusing on today. And don't lose the situation you were thinking about, but I want to move on to a slightly different question. Keep in mind where we've started from. Next question is, what does it mean to love? And I want to spend some time on this too, because different people mean different things when they talk about or use the word love. So I know there are people here who love biryani. So let's go through some examples. I think there was a time in my life when I would have said, I love my car. I don't have a car now, but can we have the picture of that? If it's there we go. This is the car we used to have when Kitty and Sam were small, and the car's name was Henry, 1954 Morris Traveller. You can't see it, but the back of the car is made of wood. Split windscreen. I could at that time have happily said, I love my car. But I have a nephew who he's now 16, but when he was younger, I think he might have been happy to say, I love trees. Next picture. My nephew he was raised in Ghana. He's half Ghanaian, half British. That is a Ghanaian tree. So I love my car. I love trees. There was a time in my life I could have said, I love my cat, although it was my family cat. Next picture. This is my dad, my big sister, me, and Paprika. I think it was somebody else's cat, really. It sort of belonged in our family. I sort of didn't have to do anything to look after it. Now, you're probably thinking, this is true, you can use the word love, but that's not what we're supposed to be talking about. Yeah? We haven't really quite got to what love really should mean yet. So how about if I say, I love Rena? Are we getting closer? Next picture. This is where we start thinking, yeah, love, that's where we think love really belongs. But it's worth noticing that it's a bit bigger than that. It's a lot bigger than that. So I think we could also say, I love my kids. So the next picture is a stack of Reno with Kitty underneath and Sam on top when they were little. I love my kids. And as the last one of these sets of pictures which illustrate the things we might mean by love, there's a picture of a guy who I suspect feels that he loves this child. But I have to say, is inflicting your weird hairstyle on the next generation a good definition of love? So let's get rid of the pictures for a minute and think about love can mean a lot of different things. We use it in a lot of different ways. So I wanted to start by noticing that so that we can think through more carefully what Jesus is talking about when he says love. And a final step for this, before we go on to Jesus' words, is there's an issue of love language. I mean, does it count as a love language to inflict your hairstyle on someone? Maybe. But there is a book from 1992 by a guy called Chapman. I don't know whether he's any kind of a believer, but he's talking about how to express love within a relationship where you want to. And so this has become famous because you can do a little, if you go online, you can find, there's a questionnaire you can do to find out how you like to receive love, how you can receive love. So just going around it. Quality time, just being together. Words of affirmation, saying good things about you. Acts of service, doing things that just are a help. Receiving gifts, especially if it's a gift special for you. Not just a gift you might give to anyone, but a gift special for you. And then physical touch, which can be romantic, but it can be with children. I mean, it can be with genuine, just friends. But this has tended to be used a lot for couples because couples are willing to concentrate on thinking hard how to make this work. But they do say that this can be used for any relationship where you actually care about someone. It's not only for couples. So, can we switch off the pictures again at that point? And having seen all these different ways of using the word love and the different ways that love might be expressed, I think we've looked at the things that love can mean. Let's move now to the question, when Jesus is talking about love, what does he mean? So Jesus says, a new command I give you, love one another. Now, if you were paying attention in the Deuteronomy series, you'll have noticed that Deuteronomy includes the Ten Commandments, it includes a whole load of stuff, and Jesus' summary of the law in just 2 commandments was love God and love one another, or love your neighbor, as it's phrased in Leviticus. In fact, that quote is from. So Jesus is saying, a new command I give you, love one another. And yet, hundreds of years before, God had said, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. Or love the person who lives near you or is near you as yourself. So how can Jesus say this is a new command? The idea of loving is not a new idea. And in 1 John, in fact, it's together, the idea that this might be a new commandment, but it's not new at all, are mixed up together. It's some combination of both. It's not really new. It is something that people who know God should always know is who God is and what he wants. But it is new because when Jesus says, "As I have loved you," he's giving a new definition of love. When he says, "People will know that you are my disciples," he's giving a new group the challenge of loving in this particular way. So he must mean something more than what is just obvious, what people always knew, what people always know. It's a special kind of love. So, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. Jesus says this to his disciples at the Last Supper in John chapter 13. He has not yet died on the cross. So let's start looking back. When he said this, he expected them to know what he meant. They did not yet know about the cross. It must have showed in the way he lived. So think through, you know Jesus' stories. Are there stories which show that Jesus loves people and how Jesus loves people? What stories come to mind? Five loaves, 2 fish, feeding people who are stuck in the middle of nowhere with no food. Yeah. So making life survivable. And in that situation, there were people who had actually come to hear Jesus. So he didn't leave them after all their effort going out into the middle of nowhere to hear him. He both gave them the chance to hear him, which is why they came, and looked after them to make sure they could get home safe. Thank you. The Samaritan woman at the well, Jesus is on his own at the well. Samaritan woman comes out on her own at the well. They have a conversation. And she is not expecting a Jewish man to talk to her. And Jesus crosses those boundaries by opening a conversation. Always be careful when a man says, "Give me a drink." You never know what is going to come next. Okay, I know there are other stories you want to be careful of. But, there is a story. That was not what she was expecting. And life was never the same again. That was a good conversation to start. I'm sure you're thinking of others, but let's move on. I wanted to point out that in John's Gospel, we hear, even at the Last Supper, that there was one particular disciple who calls himself the disciple who Jesus loved. It seems to be the disciple who wrote John's Gospel. And he was there, who was right there beside Jesus, leaning on his bosom, literal translation of the Greek, literally snuggled up to him. So there was one disciple who wrote about Jesus who wanted to describe themselves, not by the name. Some people wonder whether it was John at all who wrote that gospel. But it is clear it was written by a disciple who was happy to describe themselves as the disciple who Jesus loved. Is that you? Could you call yourself a disciple who Jesus loves? Because he does. If you are a disciple, when he was among us, there was probably only room for one person to be literally snuggled up to him at the Last Supper. But that is not true now. And physical touch we had in that list. And you don't really think of Jesus as being touchy-feely, really. You think of him standing there, being stern with the leaders who needed it, but also being comforting and encouraging to people who needed that. But you think of him standing and talking to 5,000 people. It's not very touchy-feely. But then remember that parents were bringing their little kids to touch them. And the disciples were trying to stop them. Jesus welcomed the kids and hugged them. The parents wanted him to lay hands on them, but at least in Mark's Gospel, I think it says, he took them in his arms. So I'm hoping that you can picture Jesus as someone who I don't think we could quite describe as a lover, because that gets so romantic in the way we use it in English, but as someone who truly loves you. Next part of this may be less comfortable. Jesus' idea of love is that he loves you, but notice who else he loves. Jesus was infamous. He was famous, but he was infamous. Famous for what people thought of as a bad reason, for being surrounded by the people nobody loved. The tax collectors were treated as traitors. You would not want to be seen talking to them. And then Jesus goes and invites himself to their home. The prostitutes, you really don't want to be seen talking to them. And they are among the people who gather around Jesus. And perhaps even get touchy-feely with him when one of them starts fondling his feet, using her hair. There is intimate physical touch in both directions when Jesus was with us in human form. And it was not inappropriate. Now, we may have to be careful, put in boundaries that perhaps he didn't have to. But I wanted to point out about this that we might want to put in the boundaries that say there are some people who just don't come, that shouldn't be here. They shouldn't be part of this. The tax collectors, the prostitutes, whoever else we might feel shouldn't belong, shouldn't be part of a community. These are the kinds of people who were gathering around Jesus, while the respectable people were standing back saying, whoa, this isn't how it should be. So when Jesus says to his disciples, love one another, we think of it as being that cozy community of 12 around Jesus. But you can be pretty sure if there was a dinner, the women were there. Judas was one of the people there. Cozy is not the only description of what's happening here, and Jesus knows it. And when he says it, he doesn't mean it's just for the 12. Surely it's written down because he means it for the whole of his community, including the tax collectors, not just Matthew, who's there in the room, but Zacchaeus, who probably isn't, the other tax collectors, the prostitutes. I mean, perhaps, by God's grace, ex-prostitutes. So, Jesus' idea of love is not necessarily only that comfortable part that each of us can feel. What Jesus wants for us is to experience the being loved by him. It's also the uncomfortable part of being brought into a community alongside other people where I think, whoa, hang on, I don't quite know if I'm comfortable with this. And why is that not comfortable? Well, let's be honest. It's not because Jesus is doing things wrong here. It is because this is a fallen world. It is because our society is messed up. It is because our hearts are messed up. I mean, why am I not comfortable with a prostitute coming and touching me? Because I know I'm only a step away from behaving inappropriately. You know, I pray to God a step away, not getting there. So, our world is messed up. How do we handle that? It's tempting to think we can create a little holy bubble where those problems are not there. That's the way churches have always tended to try to be. And it is true, the early church, from the earliest days, was telling soldiers they couldn't join without stopping being a soldier, because the Roman soldiers had to sacrifice to idols or be part of the ceremonies. And the other group that they would not let in were prostitutes until they changed their profession. So to some extent, there needs to be a change before people can belong. But all kinds of people from all kinds of background are around Jesus. Surely if we are to be God's family, that is who we are to be today. That's the uncomfortable part of this command, love one another. So why is it tricky? If we could come on to the next bit of slides. I've got some slides here which help us think through from a modern secular point of view. This is from an Irish website. I have no idea whether the author is a believer or not, but it's really helpful. What's going on with love? And he's got 3 kinds of love, which he calls levels of love. I think they're not even really, they don't belong in the same word. But let's notice the difference. His first one is selfish love. Selfish love where my needs come first. Now, this is not what Jesus is talking about, but it can get wrapped up on what we think of as love today. So I looked to find out a story I vaguely remembered from earlier in the year. There was a girl who was a schoolgirl who was subject to an acid attack in Rajasthan. And the reason was because a guy fancied her, a 19-year-old fancied her, and she was only 14. He was pestering her and she wouldn't have it, quite sensibly. So he threw acid at her. So he might have been wanting to say to her, I love you. And when she wouldn't have it, and he threw acid at her, what does that show about his love? His use of the word love, assuming he was using it, or that's a way you might think you can use the word love. It's not love. It's infatuation. It is totally selfish. He did not want what is good for her. He wanted what was something he saw as his own need. And sadly, this is a story. I was trying to find one particular story. I think I found it. But as I was doing the search, every year there's a news story saying the same thing. That is so sad. And yet, so much of what we think of as love is at that level. It's not as though there are just a few people who have got it wrong and the rest of us are all fine. This is an aspect of how each of us tends to respond to the world around us, to the people around us. There are times when our first thought is me, what I want, what I need. An attempt to control, an attempt to own, an attempt to benefit myself at the expense of the other. It doesn't deserve the name love, but it can come in our idea in modern language of what love is. Let's move to the second level. Because obviously it's better if we think about a more relational kind of love, where I get something out of this relationship, you get something out of this relationship. The first one isn't a relationship at all, not really. It might be a transaction. This is closer. It might be a relationship. But it's got the label here, conditional love. Even this is a kind of transaction. It's where, okay, this sort of works for both of us. But if it stops working for me, I'm going to make sure it doesn't work for you. It's a negotiation. It's a transaction. Conditional love. A lot of friendships could be on this basis. It's not brilliant. It's a start. In a way, it's the way most things go on in our world. Business happens here. But let's move on to the lost bottom level. And again, I don't know whether this was put up by a believer online, but it is a really good description of what Jesus is thinking of. Unconditional love, where your needs come first. The opposite of the selfish love, where my needs come first. Unconditional love, your needs come first. Now, this deserves the name love. And this is surely what Jesus is talking about when he says, love one another as I have loved you. They did not know that Jesus was about to die on the cross, or he was in the process of telling them, according to the other accounts of the Last Supper. And Jesus went to the cross in a way that cost him because it met our needs. Our need for reconciliation with God. Our need to be made into a fit state to receive a hug from God. The kind of thing that we couldn't quite have imagined until Jesus came to show what it's like. So, there are various Bible stories that can be used to illustrate what love is and what love isn't. The cross shows what love is. Amnon and his infatuation with Tamar, his half-sister in 2 Samuel, is an illustration of the opposite. I'm not going to go through the story, but the stories are in the Bible. But I want to just think a little bit more about our own experience, our own stories. And I want to notice that when we talk about our own experiences, often it's personal or family. But when Jesus is talking to his followers about love one another, he's thinking of the Christian community, behaving as a community, as a family. So I think it's time to notice some of the things that happen in a church community. What Jesus wants is for Wellspring and other churches like us to be a place where not only do people experience the love of God, the love of Jesus, but experience what it is to love one another. That may be the way that we experience God's love by gathering together. Sadly, when we did a survey back in March of people associated with Wellspring and got all kinds of feedback, there were good points and there were bad points when people were able to honestly answer questions about how are things. And much of it is anonymous. I mean, not everybody asked to be anonymous. And there were some people who were saying, this is great, I'm benefiting so much, and relationships are good. But I want to point out that alongside that were other people who were saying, church is hard. There are times when I feel like I'm invisible. People are not noticing me. Everyone else seems to know everybody, and I'm just standing on the side watching. Sorry, I'm elaborating. I'm not sure those words were used. There were a couple of comments like that. And that was a survey of people who are close enough to us to be willing to answer questions. How many more people have come along to Wellspring or other churches, have just turned up enough to see what it feels like and felt, I don't think I can fit in there, or I don't think I'm welcome there, or I feel like I'm invisible. Or worse, I'm actively not wanted there. Years ago, I visited a church in Birmingham and met a lady there, an older coloured woman. And when she arrived in Britain, she started going to that church at a time when the church was fully white people racially. And when she arrived, I think she didn't use these words, but she would have been one of those people who says, I feel like I'm invisible. Everyone else knew each other. They didn't actively tell her she shouldn't be there, but they didn't really treat her the same as they were treating each other. She could have just gone. But she didn't. She kept attending. She kept attending. By the time I was visiting, decades later, white people were a minority in that church. She was at the heart of church life. And I look at it and I think, thank God that she wasn't put off. And that partly because of her, others could feel welcome. where she did not. So Jesus says, love one another. He doesn't mean notice your friends and make sure you stay really close with your bosom buddies. He's saying something bigger. He's saying something deeper. He's saying, when you're meeting as my family, your job is to show my love for those people who are my bosom buddies, even if they're not yours. Or whether they know it or not, I want them to be my bosom buddies. So I'm using bosom buddies. I don't know if you're allowed to say that in India, but people who you can hug, I mean. So that is the kind of love Jesus wants from us. It's not the selfish love that says, am I getting stuff out of this? And people come up to church saying, no, I didn't get anything out of it, and go away again. That should not be us. If we're here because we want to be Jesus' people, don't ask the question, did I get something out of church today? Ask the question, did other people get something out of me being in church today? That's what counts most. And if other people did, you did get something out of it, whether it was comfortable or not. You got out of it the opportunity to show God's love to somebody. Just by being there, showing up for them, being part of God's family. So don't let the selfish love be the kind of love that we're letting be the front of our thinking. Don't let the conditional love be the kind of love that's in the front of our thinking. Are we managing to make this work? Even if it's not working well. Even if it's a church where there seem to be struggles and difficult relationships happening. Think of the Last Supper. There were struggles and difficult relationships happening. Judas was right there at the table. Peter was about to deny Jesus. Those conversations are difficult conversations. The perfect church is not one where everything is totally comfortable. That is heaven. We're not there yet. But it is where we're heading. So the unconditional love that Jesus wants to show and wants us to be part of, the more we show it, the harder the relationships will be, because the people who are most hard to love are going to come. And we're going to be right alongside them, and we're not going to have the choice to back away. Jesus is saying, how dare you keep those kids away from me? I want to hug them. The people who are hardest to feel you can be close to in church are ones who Jesus wants to metaphorically hug. Now, languages of love thing, health warning here. This doesn't mean that we need to be in an environment where the amount people hug is the test of relationship. I'm using UK language here. I was in a church in UK where hugging was a thing, where the peace, where you say, the peace of the Lord be with you, would literally involve people of all ages and all genders hugging each other. I remember one old lady who could hardly stand up, and later on she couldn't stand up. You'd have to stoop down to hug her. And that was the way the peace was exchanged in that culture, in that community. And even then, that there were two guys who, seeing it coming, would always say, it's time for a cigarette. Go outside and wait until it was safe to come back in again. So it's not for everybody. The point about the 5 languages of love is that love is not imposing on someone what you think this should involve, the two-way thing. It's noticing what works for them and being sensitive to that. So love one another. It's not quite do to others as you would want them do to you in terms of the practicalities. It's do to others what will work for them, what is comfortable for them. So, could we move on to, I've got a couple of pictures to end up with. What should this look like? Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. And he's saying, notice this, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Meaning, what it looks like does matter, or what it feels like to people popping in, or people who just know you socially and know that you're a believer. This will show. I do want to emphasize, when Jesus says, this is how people will know you are my disciples, he's not saying that we love each other for show. This is not Instagram. We're not posing for the camera to try and put on a good impression. He's saying, be real, so that when people see the reality, they will know that something real and something good is happening. So, next picture. We've got a history of doing days away in Wellspring, and this was a weekend away. Last time we had a whole weekend away. Just one of the teams and one of the activities having successfully done something. It's lovely when we have opportunity to do things like this together. This is one of the ways it shows that we love one another, that we can do stuff together. It's fun. You feel you belong. You've been part of something, and you are part of something. But, next picture, the test of love is not whether it works in the good times, but whether it works in the bad times. So this, I didn't want to use anybody else's hospital photographs, because you don't want to be photographed when you're in the hospital, do you? This is me a year ago, just over a year ago, going to the orthopedic when I'd been released from hospital, but bits of me just weren't working. And Zoe was helping because Rena had to travel. When I was in hospital, I thank God for people who came and to check that I was okay, to see what needed doing. And there were quite a few people from Wellspring who did. Thank you. I thank God for you. And when that's happening in church life, and we know that someone's not well, and Augustine is spending a lot of time in the hospital. Kim and Kieran have been spending a lot of time going to and fro from the hospital. People have been doing a lot of cooking, and Tina's been coordinating food. All of these things, I look at it and think, yes, love one another. It's happening. It needs to happen in the good times. It needs to happen in the bad times. Perhaps that's the real test of love. If we're able to help each other in the bad times, when it's not comfortable, when it needs effort. Because when Jesus says, as I have loved you, it's the love that is willing to pay a price, willing for a cost. It's not just a transaction somewhere in the middle of the levels of love where if it's comfortable, then we'll make it happen. It's the bottom one, the big foundation of what love should really be. When it hurts, when it costs, when it's not comfortable and easy, that is when love really makes the difference. It's also when the lack of love can bring a complete disaster. I've not focused on the opposites. I didn't want to today. But if I'd started with the question, when has someone not shown love to you? I'm sure you would have thought of something. Or when are you embarrassed at having not shown love to someone else? So many of those stories could come to mind. Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. If we could move on to the last picture. This is the last one. This was a Christmas party which Wellspring had a few years ago. It's great that we have opportunity to do stuff where it's us and friends and stuff's going on, and there is opportunity for really enjoying time together. But there is opportunity for people to end up coming away saying, I felt invisible. I didn't really feel I was welcome. I didn't really feel I belonged. We may not know that because they wander off. They won't come back. But I have heard from people who've known Wellspring in the past. One of them was telling me not very long ago, Wellspring's useless. You're all hypocrites. You know this person, mentioning someone that I do know. They came to Wellspring for a bit. When they were having a hard time, no one visited. Nobody cared. You're a bunch of hypocrites. We hear some good stories from what is happening. It's good. We don't always hear the stories where it hasn't happened well. both matter. It really does matter if we're not showing love. There are many people out there who can quickly bring to mind the story of the time when they didn't experience love. But Jesus tells us, love one another as I have loved you. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, not hypocrites, not people who just pretend, not people who are just having a transaction that will be fine while it works, but if it stops working, you know that will be the end of it. By this everyone will know that you are, for real, my disciples. So, let me end with a story. At a time when I was not following Jesus, I had friends whose relationships around me were a mess. And I wanted to help. I felt powerless. So some people's testimonies are, I was a bad person, I met Jesus, I'm better. I would say my heart was in the right place. I really cared that my friends were making a mess of relationships. A couple had recently got married and it was all going horribly wrong. And there were other things going on, people drinking too much, behaving badly. And I could see that people were making a mess of their lives and I had no clue how to help. At about that time, I bumped into an old friend from my home place, who said, come round for Sunday lunch. He was living in a shared house with a couple of other guys from his church. So I went round to Sunday lunch because it was nice to catch up. And there were like three of them and me, 3 guys and me. I was very impressed with his cooking, actually. I couldn't cook. He cooked fairly well. But what I remember from that day was the 3 of them who knew each other were having a kind of a relationship where I think, I wish I could have that kind of relationship with my friends. They were honest with each other, both about things that were good and about things that were bad. And they were challenging each other even over Sunday lunch, over something. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, you can do that. I knew these guys were Christians. It was partly that Sunday lunch that made me want to go and find out about Jesus. They wouldn't have known it, but I could see them loving one another just from their friendship. Jesus was at work without them even mentioning his name, I don't remember, over that lunch. I thank God for my friend Graham, who invited me to that Sunday lunch, and for his friends who I've lost track of entirely, I've lost track of who they were. But I thank God for the love that can show through in quiet ways that can have a big impact. Let's be people who love one another. And it's not about not loving the others outside. There's going to be another sermon in this series about loving your enemies. So this is not about forming a little clique, because that leaves other people feeling invisible. This is about the kind of relationship where our relationships with each other, we're confident enough that we're not constantly having to focus on that, but able to relax and focus on letting other people in too, without feeling vulnerable, without feeling shaky. But the heart of not feeling vulnerable and not feeling shaky is not actually the quality of our relationships here. Back where we started. I hope you were able to remember a time when you felt loved. I don't know who was involved in that. But whoever it was, if that was real, God was involved too. It's God who has made us able to love. It's Jesus who has shown us how to love. And our confidence in going into difficult situations where we might not be appreciated, we might not feel loved, our confidence should come from knowing Jesus is right beside us. Jesus' arm is right round us in those difficult situations. We don't depend on whether or not the person we're dealing with is going to give us a hug or not. Jesus' arm is right around us already. Let's take those risks of going into difficult situations. Not depending on how the other person may or may not respond, but depending on God's love for us, because that is what we long to share with others. And if we don't have that as our starting point, we may not have that deep love, that level 3 unconditional love to share at all.